Welcome back to the Standing Light podcast, everybody. I am your host, Leyla Salvadé, and today I have the absolute pleasure and personal honor to have my dear friend, Emily Liu, on the podcast. Emily is the co-founder of Epic Love Institute, along with her incredible husband, Jim, who I adore. Emily is trained in the cutting-edge healing modality, internal family systems, which I have referenced in many podcasts. She is the author of two incredible books, How to Permanently Erase Negative Self-Talk and the book Climax, Why Great Leaders Need Love Affairs. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur in 2012, she spent 27 years in pharmaceutical sales. Emily and I got to meet many years ago, I believe it was 2015, at my first A-Fest, Mind Valley, and it is my greatest honor to shine a light on you today, Emily.
Oh, thank you, Leyla. I have treasured our friendship from the day we met. It's just such a special connection we have.
You have been a fundamental healing force in my life. And every time I reference IFS or internal family systems, or like I like to call it, parts therapy, I always think of you because you brought me onto that incredible modality. And let me tell you, in my opinion, I've been in this self-development coaching healing space for, gosh, I don't know, many, many years. Let's say a good 20 years. And this therapy or this modality has fundamentally changed my life and truly, truly helped me heal in a way that it's just life-changing. It really is. So I cannot wait for our audience to hear. We're also going to do a spotlight therapy session on one of my parts, or we'll see what comes up. And I'm already a little bit nervous about it because it's quite vulnerable. Let's dive into it. I would love to just hear your explanation of IFS and how you right now also are sharing it with the world with Jim.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're sharing it with the world in terms of saving people's marriages and relationships.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Because there's a layer on top of the internal family systems model that has been superimposed to really track a couple's conflict. And that is a couples therapy training modality called intimacy from the inside out, developed by one of the lead trainers of internal family systems. And because she's always been a couples therapist, and she says, how do we bring this model to save relationships? And so there's another step on top of that in order to really unpack what are the root causes of that conflict. And unfortunately, traditional couples therapy modalities do not go deep enough so that people can share from their heart their vulnerabilities with each other, right? Because as you, the heart math expert, it's all about getting into your heart. But if you don't do the healing work to understand your parts, it's very difficult to get into your heart to really express what you're scared about or worried about, because that's what really drives conflict. And in terms of like your commentary on how IFS is such a powerful modality that is so different than anything else, if you do a Google search, the number of people that just say, OMG, IFS has saved my life. I've been in therapy for 20 years and there's nothing like it.
It's true. I can attest to that.
True. And even my husband, who went into IFS therapy a number of years ago because of one of his parts that he needed to improve. And he had tried many therapists prior to that, and this was the only thing that resonated and worked and transformed him into a better version of himself. And it was so enlightening for me to hear from a prominent physician that works at the Harvard psychiatric hospital. And of course, he's exposed to many different types of therapy in the 30 years that he had been involved in the field. And we had become close friends with he and his partner. And even he, from that Harvard perspective, where he knows a lot of stuff and modality, when he got introduced to IFS, he's like, OMG, there was nothing like this. And he's now, he switched therapists. He had been seeing somebody for 20 years and it was traditional talk therapy, but that never got to the roots of his trauma.
It doesn't.
No. Yeah. And then he goes to IFS therapy. He's like, wow, holy cow. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of parts healing in this podcast episode so people can understand what this is about.
Yeah, because it's really, I mean, I remember when you were trying to explain it to me, this was, gosh, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you shared, I mean, I was used to the traditional therapy of talk therapy, you go in, you get out after 15 minutes, that's it, right? And here I am very naively assuming we just need one session. Yeah. And remember, and yes. You're like, oh boy, no, this is deep work. And I was like, oh, I do deep work all the time. And you're like, yeah, okay. And we, we start with the first session and oh my goodness. I mean, I love going deep. I've got a Scorpio moon and deep is where I love to be. And I think also that's why I resonate, but not just because of that, because this obviously resonates with so many people. Aubrey Marcus even has Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, on his podcast talking about it, and also does a little session on the podcast live. And I feel that when we come to understand ourselves through our parts, it changes everything, because we often speak about, right? Most of us know, okay, we know the ego part, we know the inner child part, we know the higher self part, the soul part, whatever, right? Most of us don't even think about attributing those as parts, right? We don't, like, that's a missing code almost. But once you do start to understand that that's a part of your holistic system, and then there's so many more parts to you as well. Like I had a fat part, right? I had how many parts have we worked with? Many, right? I had.
Yeah. So, you know what? Maybe I should have looked back on the notes on what we covered. Okay. So let me just explain the Cliff's Notes version of what internal family systems are all about. And Leyla just mentioned, like, the fat part. Okay, that is just a part of you. It's not all of you. The mistake or the misinformation people have is, let's say you meet somebody who's in ego, right? Okay, look at me, listen to my story. And prior to knowing about all of this, the tendency for many of us is to, like, oh my God, that John is so egotistical. Oh my gosh, he's so self-centered and so judgmental. And so you basically say, or he's so narcissistic, or he's an alcoholic. So when we describe people with those adjectives, when we're describing it that way, that is our judgment part speaking of them. And we are labeling them as, he's the alcoholic. No, he's not. All of him is not an alcoholic. He has a part that is in an extreme role of protection, helping him to cope with life by drinking, because it's trying to protect something very vulnerable on the inside.
That's been deeply traumatized or hurt.
Exactly. So in this model that developed by Dr. Dick Schwartz, he developed it almost 40 years ago by accident, by as he was treating his eating disorder patients and anorexic patients, bulimic patients. And he was trained in family systems therapy, which means trying to manage all the different players in a family, right, who are fighting. And in his playing around with these eating disorder patients, what he was trained in wasn't working. So he just started to listen to how they were speaking. And what he realized that in an external family, you have conflict. There's a system of relationships with each other that is creating the conflict in the family. And what he uncovered was, that's the external family. Internal family, all of us have an internal family of these little sub-personalities. And these sub-personalities are in a system of relationships with each other. Some are like, no, there's a part of you that wants you to eat vegetables and eat healthy. And then there's another part that wants you to eat desserts and ice cream to soothe whatever it is. And so these two parts, they're fighting with each other inside. That's why it's called internal family systems. Mm. And those are your different parts. You have your like regular parts that get you through the day. Like you have your podcasting part, your performance part, your achievement part that goes out and heals people, or for some people it's going and doing a job. And you have a presenter part and perfectionist part that makes sure that if you're an accountant, that everything is dotted and crossed. And so those are the normal parts that help us go through the day.
You could also call them roles, right? Like we associate ourselves in different roles. Yeah.
Into roles. And so those are parts. And then there's the higher self. Parts and higher self. Higher self is your heart, the essence, the Buddha nature, the inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it. Inner pilot light, which one of our friends calls it. Heart intelligence. It's all like the love and the compassion, the curiosity, connectedness, playfulness, presence. Those are all qualities of the self.
Higher self.
And one, and the higher self. One of the ways that we invite people to, like, this is, you are in self at times. So for example, pet owners, when you see your dog, you're like, oh, you just drop into your heart. Yeah, that is your higher self. Or
unconditional love.
Right. Or when you're noticing a new baby at a family gathering, your cousin brought their new baby, and you're like, oh, you would be in that loving cooing mode with that baby. So that is your heart, the pure essence of who you are. And then you have these parts, and so it's important to differentiate, like, oh yeah, my cooking part's gotta get going now with dinner. So all of these are different parts. And then parts, there are different categories of parts. So what I just described is just regular parts, your driving part, whatever. Parts can get into extreme roles. And when they get into an extreme, they're called protectors because they're protecting something. So many of us have a drinking part. I have a social drinking part. I have a glass of wine every night, or I like my, one glass of wine or something with my dinner, or on the weekends at the most, maybe I'll have two. And so, okay, I'm managing my parts. I'm okay with my drinking part, drinking a little tonight. But for some people, those parts can get into extreme. They're drinking 5 drinks a night, or whatever else, whatever compulsive thing they're doing. Those are all parts in an extreme, protecting something vulnerable inside, a wounded inner child. And even shyness. Some of us have shy parts, but some people, and shy parts, you know what? I don't feel like interacting because right now I'm feeling whatever. But some people have a shy part that is extreme. They're so afraid of social interactions that affects your life. So this is about looking about the different parts of you that get in the way of emotional connection to yourself, to others, that get in the way of success, that get in the way of actually living the life you want. Oh, I'm just too fat. I'm 30 pounds overweight. I can't date. Or let's say you are dating and you do have some weight issues, and then your partner doesn't struggle with weight. So each time, let's say if he even looks at another woman and admires her, then that could be triggering to like, whoa, I have a body image issue. So he looking at another woman or being friendly could activate that insecurity, right? And it's all because you have unhealed wounds from the past.
And unhealed parts. Yeah. And I love, I remember you saying once, I don't know if there's a point where we actually, I mean, I guess that's called enlightenment, but the point where we heal every single part of us. But
yeah, I'm not sure if that
it's possible, but
it's always work in progress. Yeah,
exactly. We all are each and every day. But I remember you giving this example of once you heal that part, it becomes your cheerleader. And I even remember you doing this hand gesture. If you're watching on on YouTube, you'll see me gesturing. But you kind of did this, and I remember that because it just felt like, okay, I will have parts that are kind of going to get ahead of me and literally be my protectors. They have their purpose, which is actually hindering me and enabling me from operating in my highest self right now. So once I get to that specific part, because there's a few things that you have to get through before you actually can get to the protector sometimes. Yeah. But once you get to the protector part, one of many, for me at least, you get to have this beautiful, vulnerable conversation with that part, and it decharges them. And I do this work with my clients when it comes to emotions. Like I use the concept of IFS with emotions. And it's incredible. Your imagination takes flight and this part becomes this character. And we get into, and this is what I love about IFS as well. We get to actually use our playful childlike nature again, which is also our heart, right? It's just our purest essence and expression, where when we get to come into that playful nature again, activating and using the faculty of imagination, and we get to observe this specific part, suddenly it starts to transform. And then suddenly it goes from contracted to expanded, and it literally enlightens right before your very eyes. And I mean, it's genuinely magical, Yeah. And then that part, instead of being this kind of like fist tight protector that's constantly just like angry and contracted and resistant to any kind of positive change, suddenly, surrenders and heals in front of you. And then it gets to become one of your greatest supporting agents. So
right.
I wanted to share that as well, because it's incredible what happens through this modality. It really
is. And since you referred to one of your parts in we're doing the work,
like using me as an example in this podcast.
Yeah. So so a lot of people who have struggled with eating issues or food issues, and maybe what do you want to call this part? Well, that's my fat part. That fat part is just obsessed with food all day. And usually what happens is when we have a behavior, or parts are behaviors, emotions, thoughts, beliefs. Yeah, okay, my fat part. I hate my fat part, or I hate my drinking part. So the more you hate the part, the bigger it will get. Yes. Because that part of you is trying to get your attention so you could heal it. Exactly. So our angry part, the micromanagement part, or controlling part, right? Oh God, okay, I got controlling again with my spouse. Geez, I hate that part. So instead of hating it, you have to befriend it. The higher self, the heart, with compassion and curiosity, has the power to befriend this part and heal this part, because these behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that you are not crazy about, once they tell you their story of why they took on their job, and they take on these extreme roles at the moment of wounding, back, especially, if you could identify those wounds, the earlier, the earlier, the more powerful, especially when you're pre-verbal before the age of 2, because so many memories are just lodged in there out of your conscious awareness. And when you can understand, oh, why did shy part come into my life, and let that part tell its story to you, and you like, oh, you're just a 7-year-old that had to take on this role. Oh my gosh, did you know that I am 40 years old now, and that you're holding me back from dating, or, whatever the issue is. Like, oh, I didn't know you were 40. I thought you're still 7. I've been trying to protect that 7-year-old, because behind that protector is a vulnerable little girl or little boy that experienced something devaluing. It could be something really horrific, like some sort of, physical or emotional abuse, or it could be a seemingly innocent, quote unquote, remark by the teacher in 3rd grade. We're like, if you keep doing that, you're never going to amount to anything. So stop it. And when a 3rd grader hears that, that is going to be sealed in, because that was criticism.
I had one of those parts, right? I had the I am stupid part, or stupid part.
Yes.
And it was because when I was in 4th grade, so I was 8 years old, my teacher called me stupid to my face and said I was never going to go anywhere.
Oh, and that, now I vaguely remember that. And that sits with you, because that's what we remember. You're remembering it at 30 something. And it's because it's seared into your brain. And so we have to understand that, oh, you, Leyla, 34 years old, we're you telling the stupid part. Well, we're not stupid. The teacher just said that because she didn't know any better. She doesn't know, or he didn't know all of who we are. I know you're not stupid. I just want you to know what you have accomplished since 8 years old. So and it's like and what you have to do is take that part out of the past, because it's stuck and frozen in time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you, as a higher self, has the power to like come into the present. I'm here for you. I know mommy was really mean, or the teacher was really mean. You are reparenting that part of you. You're and reprogramming its beliefs. So it's helping the higher self, helps to unburden that emotional baggage and the limiting beliefs that were taken on as a result of that incident.
And what I think is also, you mentioned this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your parts will never go away or die or, disappear.
Yes.
They just, once we logically can comprehend the part and its purpose, we get to then be aware of when it's active again.
Be aware when it's active again, but also parts would rather be doing something else. You ask the part, you know what, you took on this role when you were 8 years old. What would you rather be doing? I'd rather go out and play and be, feel smart and take risks.
Yeah.
So we are energetic beings,
Mhm.
and every part has an energy and a role. A part's number one fear is that we're going to get rid of them.
Mhm.
And we assure them, no, okay, jealous part, whatever, fat part, overachievement part. You know what? We're not going to get rid of you. We're going to negotiate with you from the heart, the higher self. We can negotiate. What would you rather be doing? I want to go and rest on the beach. I have been working so hard since 8 years old. I need a rest. But if you need me to come back, let's say angry part, right? Everybody has anger is a core emotion that
yes.
all of us have.
Yeah.
All right, so let's use anger. Some people get angry really easily over the smallest thing, right? Their anger has become a protector,
Mhm.
has gotten into extreme. And anger often, and may say, I don't want to be working 80% of the time. I want to just be on the sidelines. And when you really need me, like when you're walking down a dark alley and you don't know if it's safe, you want anger to be right next to you
Mhm.
so that it can jump in and take over and help you.
Protect you. Yeah.
To protect you. Yeah. So, okay, anger, it's time for you as the higher self say, anger, you take over.
Mhm.
Because I know what, you could say, maybe that person has an angry part that can be very effective when it comes to somebody cutting me off or whatever it is. So you just engage that anger part when it's needed.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so parts can transform, their energy can transform into something else. You get to, it will negotiate with.
Yeah.
Or let's say you are going out on a hot date. Yeah, you're gonna be dropping into your heart, but you're also gonna be like, okay, what, I have a sense of humor. All right, my humor part. Okay, you could be on board tonight. Your higher self is curious and connected, so you're just going to be curious towards the other person. You're going to show the self energy of your loving heart. So just like the heart math thing,
Mhm.
your heart intelligence, if you show up with your heart, that's very endearing on a date to try to connect.
Right. Because you're staying open and there's no walls or barriers, and you're, yeah, energetically communicating on the subtle level or through the subtle levels
Exactly.
with one another. Yeah. I want to get in a little bit to the aspect of the higher self and or soul connected, you know, with the heart, because that was some of the most profound work you and I did together. And I want to share a little bit of that with our audience, because it it can really help you understand how not only multifaceted we are, which IFS will do so anyway, but to really understand that there are certain things, ailments, triggers, obsessive compulsive disorder, whatever it may be, that might not even stem from this lifetime.
Right.
For me, one of my biggest powerful parts was my fat part, or my emotional eating disorder part, because I was never anorexic or bulimic. Food was my drug. I never had any addictions in my life besides food. And it wasn't until I really understood that part where I was able to heal that. And I was able, through our work, I was able to heal my emotional eating disorder.
Right.
So I want to just shine a light on that briefly to give access to our viewers and listeners, or a glimpse of the soul part, because it's really important that we start to speak more about this part. In my opinion, it's intrinsically connected to the heart. In ancient Egypt, they believed and know, I mean, it wasn't just ancient Egypt, most ancient traditions and cultures, they understood the connection between heart and soul. And the heart, they say, is the seat of our soul. It's the home of our soul in this lifetime. So the soul comes in, the soul is you, it's your higher self. And your soul has usually, I mean, there are new souls, but usually your soul has lived many lifetimes and or parallel lifetimes. That's another topic for another day, but for the sake of just keeping it simple, let's call it past lives, because it's a little bit easier to comprehend it logically. But I would like to just share that a brief story about my emotional eating disorder part, or what we ended up calling my fat part, because it goes really deep. And sometimes to heal that part, it means going into a past life.
Yes, and past life is just a part. And I remember when you first approached me with this, and you were saying you have a past life part, and I asked one of the, I probably reached out to one of the trainers, and I said, what am I supposed to do with past life? And they're like, it's just a part. It's no different. And because our soul, many of us believe the soul is eternal. If you read the literature on near-death experiences, all those people say, I watched myself, my soul was up here, I was on the operating table there. I was like, you know what? And then I decided, you know what, it's not time to go yet. I still have other things to accomplish. So then my soul went back
into the body.
Yeah, I think sharing that your personal story will help people to feel a little more enlightened. Before we go there, I just want to say something about the soul or higher self, whatever you want to call it.
Please.
When we are born, if we are born into a loving family, babies, they express all sorts of things. Toddlers, they're uninhibited, right? And each time that baby growing into a toddler, whatever, starts to get shut down by who they are, the authority figures that they are surrounded by. Oh no, Johnny, let me hit you because you made a mess over there, or you get yelled at, or let's say you're doing great in school, and then you discover that you're really an artist and not somebody geared towards science and math. And then let's say you have parents who are academics, and they know nothing about art, and all they know is that a lot of artists don't make money and don't have a successful life. Then let's say the parents judge it. No, you have to study math and science, and no, you're not going to art school. Then in those moments, those parts get shut down, and the more wounding somebody experiences, the self gets checked out of the system.
Yes.
The more trauma you have, the more you cannot be in self. You cannot, it is not safe to be in your heart. And let all your parts like, oh yeah, and then I'm going to express this side of my personality and whatever. No, they become very guarded. Like, what? You want me to, what? My heart? What is that? So the soul is never damaged. It can come back, but in all of that trauma, the soul, the self gets checked out of the system.
Yeah.
And that's why some people, you're just like, oh, I can't feel their heart. They're so egotistical. They're so afraid. Whatever adjectives,
disconnected. Yeah.
And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they have had so many wounds that have not been healed in the right way. So you can't force somebody to be in their heart if they haven't done the trauma healing. So I just wanted to just express that important point. And if there's anybody that wants to read further on complex trauma and how do you heal all of that, one of the senior trainers and psychiatrists in the internal family systems community, his name is Dr. Frank Anderson. And last year, he published a book called Transcending Trauma. It's a great read.
Okay.
On complex trauma and the role of IFS in healing these burdened systems. Okay, I'm gonna go back to you and
the burden systems, diving deep into burden systems. So, I mean, I actually want you to help guide this as well, but just to give a little pre-story, I've always, I don't know why, but I've always had a very deep connection with my soul. I've always known it. It's just been where and from I know I have operated from. It's been tested many times. It's been made wrong. I've been scared to shine it and express from it a lot of the time. So I've contracted and made myself small. All that happened for sure, but still I never built large enough or powerful enough walls or disconnected, to a certain degree, to not fully operate from that as much as possible, or consciously know that that's my highest self and I can operate from that part. From 6 years old, I started using food as this emotional agent, like blocker. It just, how would I describe it? I guess from 6 years old, suddenly my relationship with food changed. And because I knew when I went through my first dark night of the soul at 22 years old, in 1 year, my parents divorced. I broke up with the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. My grandmother died or passed away in my arms, foaming out of her mouth. And I was all alone. I had nobody to turn to. And it was a very tough time. While I had to somehow muster up the energy to graduate from the #1 fashion school in the world. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot that I was going through. And in that 1 year, I gained 20 pounds because I turned to the one thing that was able to help me or that made me feel better. And at the same time, I would start having kind of just emotional breakdowns or panic attacks. And at one point, and I had been working and trying different things, and I ended up at a hypnotherapist's office. And in one seating, my soul went from this lifetime into my next lifetime. And here I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go into this session and afterwards I'm going to be 20 pounds lighter within a month.
That's what they promised, right? Come to hypnotherapy to lose weight and stop smoking.
Well, he didn't. He was he was a very old Swiss traditional guy, and I just had one session with him ever. I happened to be visiting my mom, and she actually turned me on to him. So I was desperate, and so I went and had a session with him before flying back home to New York, and that was a very, very life-changing experience for me. And we then, because I had that knowing, worked tremendously on that part and lifetime. But just to kind of share a little bit so that people aren't confused, and this can be a very out there story. So a part of me even, has questioned many times whether I should share this or not, because for some, it probably will never make sense and it's difficult to digest. But when you understand the soul and all the different lifetimes or parallel times available, really what happened was I was at the therapist, and he basically, as in hypnotherapy, you connect a specific expression in your body. So I knew somehow I was able to coach myself to recognizing when the first time was that I had started emotionally eating. And I was able to trace it back to when I was 6 years old. And we were about to have dinner. My father came home from work. My mother, being very Lebanese, cooked for an army as usual, as we do in the Middle East or the Mediterranean cultures. You always create more and you always give more. My father, being much more Swiss, came home, and he's the sweetest person in the world, but his dismay alone, telling my mom, we're just 4 people. Why is there so much food? It triggered something in me, and I went into this protector mode where I felt like I had to protect my mom and or save my mom, and I couldn't understand why. And I decided to eat everything so that my father would know that it was exactly the right amount of food. So at 6 years old, I'm eating, way too much just to basically, quote unquote, save my mom. And I didn't know, like, why would I do that? Why is there a part of you that does something like that? Right. And so when I was at the hypnotherapist office, I told him about that memory, and he said, okay, great. Well, where do you feel that pain in your body? And I connected it back. I felt it right, like in my upper chest area up to my neck. It just felt like suffocating. So then we use that feeling to start tracing it back. And so you go under, you connect with your subconscious or unconscious self, and he asks you, okay, when's the last time you felt this? And when you're in that state, there's no right, black or white, right or wrong. You just know. There's not even a question about it. That's the powerful thing when you really let your heart guide you, your soul guide you, or your subconscious. You go to places that your mind would never let you go. And then next thing you know, I was in my mother's womb. And I remember I had this memory where she was being yelled at by her father in the south of France. She was visiting her family. And then she ran to the bathroom and started crying, but really like sobbing. So I have that, I stored that memory. She was pregnant with me, and I remember that memory or that experience. So then the hypnotherapist asks, okay, is that the last time you felt that feeling in your body? And I said, no. And then even, you're quote unquote under, but your consciousness is you're still aware of what's going on, right? So at this point, I'm starting to tell myself, oh my gosh, I'm actually crazy. Like, what's beyond this, And I've already been very spiritual and open-minded from a young age, but to experience it yourself is something, it's just different. And so I started going through literally this tunnel of light, or my soul started going through a tunnel of light from my mother's womb through a tunnel of light. And I ended up on this cloud, or quote unquote heaven. And as soon as I looked down to my left, I started hysterically shaking and crying in the hypnotherapist's office. So this lifetime now here, as Leyla Salvadé, was when I looked down to the right of the cloud, but when I looked down to the left, that was my past life. And I immediately somehow knew that. And I started getting really scared because, number one, that was a very horrible lifetime. But I also got scared because I thought I was actually losing my mind. And that once I woke up from this experience, there was going to be people in white coats ready to take me somewhere. And so he assured me that, he said, you're an extremely old soul. Usually people don't go into their past life in the first 5 minutes, but your soul is guiding you. So I'm just going to hold space. You go. And so I went, and my most recent past life was in the Holocaust in Auschwitz. And I was in the camps. My mother in this lifetime was my older sister. and she was holding this tiny loaf of bread, and we had already been in there for months and months and months. And we were practically just, standing, just hanging on by one thread. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. And we were supposed to share that loaf of bread, but I was so hungry and I was crying. And so she gave me the whole loaf. And that made her so weak that she couldn't work the next day, and they put her into the gas chambers and killed her. So I'm eventually going to do a whole solo podcast about all these different experiences that I've gotten to go through by letting my soul guide me into the deepest healing ever without any plant ceremony, because you can do this all naturally. But I just wanted to share that because we got to then work on a much deeper level because it activated this emotional eating part.
Right.
And just going into that lifetime and understanding that, that helped me profoundly, because not only did it help me understand why I started eating or having this relationship with food, but it also gave me access to a whole deeper part of me. But it still didn't, I still had to really understand that part specifically. And that's where you came in, and we ended up doing an incredible, I remember this session where we actually went back into that lifetime and rescued that part of me.
Yeah. And it took, I remember you said, oh yeah, just one session should be able to cure me. I'm like, I suspect not, because there are a bunch of protectors that are protecting, and let's see if they're even going to let us do the healing. And so I think we had 5 like 90-minute sessions, and it was that 5th session where finally you're like, now that I've gotten to know all these parts and befriended them and understand why they took on that role, all right, I think I'm finally ready to rescue that Holocaust part out. And that Holocaust part with the food deprivation and all, and that's why it made so much sense that you have a food part that was so obsessed with food all day long, right? And it was preventing you from being more productive because you were just obsessing over what am I going to eat today, and what am I going to show, if I'm having a meal with other people, okay, what am I going to put on my plate?
My worst nightmare.
Yeah.
It used to be. Now it's, I'll just eat a whole cake in front of somebody. I don't care.
Right. You're not even caring about it, because we
No.
got to know the part and they transformed. They're like, we don't need to do this protection anymore because, oh my gosh, that Holocaust part is out of the past. And that also makes sense. As you grew up in this lifetime at 6 years old, here you are watching your mother get criticized by your father. Now, as a 6-year-old, most parents, if they're having a little difference with each other, and the kids are small, we're not taught that, everything you say to each other is going to be absorbed by your kid. So that kid, because we're not, we think they're a kid, we don't need to explain what just happened to a 6-year-old, right? And so the 6-year-old, we are meaning-making machines. That 6-year-old little Leyla is like, what is going on here? Oh my gosh, my mom is getting critical. Whoa. How do I make sure that this conflict stops? You know what? I'm going to show daddy that she made the right amount of food, and I'm going to eat this whole thing, right? And your parents had no idea what was going on inside of you. So then you just carry this experience with you. And at 34, you remember it as clear as it happened, yesterday. And so the Holocaust part, you were aware of it from hypnotherapy. And I totally get that hypnotherapy, you understood the emotion that your mother was carrying when she was pregnant with you. I had a hypnotherapy session 20 years ago that also like uncovered me in my mother's belly and feeling unworthy, because I was growing up in Taiwan and I had already taken on the belief from her that I'm not a boy, so I'm not worthy of being born. Because I remember my grandmother's message to her that you got to keep getting pregnant until you produce sons. I mean, how does an infant, a growing fetus, even know that stuff? But this stuff is real. It gets absorbed into
It's
the
energy.
thoughts. Yeah. Okay. So then when we finally, when you were ready, okay, we're on Zoom, and then you had a whole bunch of stuffed animals or something to represent the different parts.
Yeah.
And for your system, you needed the visual in front of you. And finally, like, I'm ready today. And then I had to make sure, are there any parts of you that have any concerns or fears about going back to the Holocaust, and rescuing that part out? So I had to make sure it was okay for your system, and so that we don't have backlash, right? And it was okay for your system. And then I guided you to go back, transport yourself back into the Holocaust to rescue that young Leyla from a past life. And then if I remember correctly, you brought her out, and then you just had an imaginary wall or gate or something.
Yeah.
That closed.
To energetically sever any extra, whatever, I don't know, emanation from that lifetime.
Yeah.
To create,
So that,
to create safety in a sense.
exactly. That was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And that is the crux of the goal of internal family systems therapy, is because all the different parts of you that you're having, that you're struggling with, food part, or workaholic part, or some other compulsive behavior, or sadness, depression, excessive anxiety, all of that can be shifted to a better way of being once we identify the parts that it protects, that is stuck in the past. So you had a part of you that is stuck in the past, and that's what we did. We took that out so that, the fat part, the obsessed with food part, like, you mean we don't need to do our job anymore to obsess over food 24/7? Oh, finally. All that part is safe with Leyla in the present moment.
And that's when I lost a lot of weight. Moral of the story.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I obviously wasn't doing it for that, right? And I mean, I wasn't ever fat, right?
When I met you, I said, oh my, okay, so she has a food part. She looks very normal from the outside, but you were obsessing over, okay, it's not like you were eating a box of Haagen-Dazs ice cream every night. And
oh no, I was in that one year. I was
you're right. Okay, so you were able to exercise it off and keep your, you didn't go so excessive where you ended up being 100 pounds over your.
No, but I think, I was an athlete since I was young. And so I just looked built, but like very built, and it just, I had a lot of extra weight on me. So yeah, but I feel like it's important to just add this part. My mother and I, every time we're out in public together, people don't believe that she's my mother. We look like sisters. So that's, there's so many, that's the thing. When you really start to tap into your soul memory and your soul essence, and you start to heal from that level, the synchronicities or the dots in your life that felt so incoherent or disconnected start to suddenly make the most extraordinary sense you could have ever imagined. And, different, I mean, that specific lifetime was one of the most, it affected so much of my life in this lifetime, even relationships. And so I was
Right.
able to really heal, because there was even a soulmate from that lifetime in this lifetime that I mean, I'll do a solo podcast about this, but yeah, I just felt like it was important to talk about it from the soul perspective, and how, you know, it goes so deep. It goes
Yeah.
so deep.
And this is why the internal family systems model is it's a model of self leadership.
Mhm.
It's about accessing. Some people, they don't have access to self because of all of their traumas, but a lot of people, you have some self, and other people's are really heart led. So it's called self leadership, because when you have been traumatized
Mhm.
and your parts take over, whatever you want to call these parts, angry parts, perfectionist parts, overworking parts, controlling parts, and all those people, we could all think of people who have been taken over by their parts, and so it's recognizing that the parts take over. So that means that person is not in self leadership. That means that person is not operating from their heart.
Mhm.
Right. And so the whole goal of IFS therapy is to start with the protectors. What are the things that you are bothered by, or you want to get to know? Emotions, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, sensations, beliefs. Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks that love won't last. So many of us have relationship issues, based on what we experienced as a child. Oh yeah, he's going to leave me anyways. Everybody has always left me. All right, that I keep attracting that kind of pattern. You take whatever you're bothered by, and we start the inquiry by getting to know this part, and how the goal is for your heart, yourself, to develop a friendship, a relationship with the part that bothers you. And that relationship is what's gonna, like, oh, now that you finally hear me and what I'm scared about, and this is why I show up in your life. Oh, I didn't know I was doing that much damage in your life. I just let you know the younger part of you that I'm protecting. And you're gonna go and rescue. Finally. So it's about self-leadership, having your heart lead, and also having your heart speak for the part.
Exactly.
Not speak from the part.
Mhm.
If you are being the part, you're blended with the part. So if you are angry and you are just lashing out and raising your voice, you are being the part. You're blended. And when you're blended, it's difficult for the other person to really receive you.
Mhm.
So the goal is, okay, I know I'm angry. Let's say, my husband did something. I am so pissed. I'm going to speak for anger.
Mhm.
I'm going to externalize this.
And then instead of saying, I am angry, I am feeling angry.
I am feeling angry. This angry part of me is saying, that was not nice, what you just did. This angry part, it really didn't like what you did, because it felt familiar with what my father used to do. And so can you just, I don't want to be angry towards what you just did. I just want to let you know the impact it has on me. So I'm going to keep this anger in check, but I just want you to hear how it's affecting me. This angry part is saying you should really change your behavior, blah, 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 because it's really scared that if you don't change this behavior, that you might go and reject me later or whatever. So so the goal is self-leadership. You get vulnerable. You speak your deepest truth, what you're scared about. You speak for that part of you.
And it's not about emotionally bypassing or making excuses for somebody else, because if your husband says something that's not nice, I mean, it's only normal and natural for us to feel angry and hurt. IFS has helped me profoundly in my relationships, whether intimate relationships or just friendships or even in work, right? Where when you speak from a part and you say, a part of me feels this, right? Even just saying that makes an extraordinary difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And if for those viewers and listeners who, the one thing you can adopt is start to use the parts language. A part of me feels, a part of me, you know what? Yeah, where do you want to go for dinner? Well, part of me is in the mood for Italian. Another part of me is in the mood for sushi. I have a part that really wants to eat the Japanese dessert, but then, I also have a part that wants to eat some cannolis and so some of us are already doing this organically and we're not even realizing it.
Exactly.
I know I should be eating my vegetables tonight. But then I have a part that really wants to stop eating the vegetables and go right to the ice cream. Mm-hmm. It's naming it, it's externalizing it. Mm-hmm. Or let's say you're dating and the guy is not answering the text in a timely fashion. It's early on, maybe the third or fourth day, you're still kind of playing games and he hasn't replied in 3 days and you're wondering, am I being ghosted? Mm-hmm. So one of the ways of speaking for the part is to say, I'm noticing that I haven't received an answer back from my last text. And I have several voices going on. I have one part that's saying, did it go through? I can't check to see if it was actually read. And then another part of me is just saying, am I being ghosted? And then another part saying, did I do something wrong? And am I not attractive anymore? I don't know what's going on. So I have these different voices. And ultimately, I would like to have clarity from you, because if you have decided that we're not the right fit, would it be okay if you gave me the closure? Mm-hmm. I would be totally fine with it. But I just want to let you know, these are the inner voices that are inside of me.
We all have multiple personality disorders.
Yes, in a healthy way. Our mind is multiple. We are born this way. Even babies, they have angry parts, they have screaming parts, and they have
express it. They actually express it. And so they are healthy, right? They're healthy. And that's the beauty of children. We really still express all of our parts. And then at some point we're told, no, that part is not allowed to express itself, or that part is not allowed to express itself. And then we exile that part and we shut it away and shut it down, and we never let it speak again, or never let it be expressed again. And that's where the damage happens ultimately. And so IFS helps you then rescue or go on a mission to get those parts back and hear them out and tend to them from a compassionate, loving, unconditional place. And just, using heart intelligence. I mean, the virtues of the heart are, the heart doesn't judge, right? It's not a binary organ.
There's no agenda.
Yeah, the head brain will judge, because that's one of its very important functions. We need judgment. Should I go this way or that way? Is this better or that better right now? And I think it was Aristotle that said, for the small decisions, trust the head. For the big decisions, trust the heart.
Yeah. Trust. What does the self say? And just like we did the healing of the Holocaust part, and that's when, like you say, you lost the weight and things started to shift and you stopped obsessing. I mean, I'm hoping that the viewers and listeners can see the power of when you heal. And the wounded inner child part in the IFS system is called exile.
Yeah,
because they've been exiled out of our systems for protection. Our protectors, nope, that part of you is going to stay forever locked up. I'm not going to ever have you feel that shame or that hurt again.
That fear. Yeah. And what happens is the part goes from being exiled to liberated.
Yes.
And that's what I experienced, this was, my gosh, this was years ago, mind you, to everybody that's watching and listening.
It was 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when we did this work. And since then, just to explain, like I would go to parties or out to people's homes, be invited to dinners. I could not experience overwhelming anxiety in any of those situations, because I would be looking at the food and calculating and feeling that everybody was going to look and watch everything I put onto my plate. And all I wanted to do was put everything on my plate. So I would put as little as possible on my plate, practically starve myself. And then I would go home and completely gorge myself. Right. And after that final session that we had, I, hand on my heart, to this day, have never, ever, ever been trapped in that contracted anxiety part ever again. It's like we decharged that completely. We liberated that part of me entirely, so much so that, I could not care less what I eat in front of people anymore. And it's truly liberated a huge, well, not just me, but therefore a huge part of my life, where I can go and be a normal, quote unquote, God knows I'm not normal, but just not be trapped by some thing that just feels so controlling and overwhelming.
Yeah, and that is the power of internal family systems, and this is why this has, with Dr. Schwartz and other IFS people being on podcasts and doing a demo of what this is like, it has reached epic proportions in the demand for it. And there's even such demand for the training. There are thousands of people on a wait list that can't even get into a training.
And I'm really annoyed about that one.
Yeah, I know.
I want to get trained in this as soon as possible. I've been through so much, therapy through it anyway, that I feel like, especially when it comes to emotions, I use that with emotions. And it's profound, even what I see in my clients, when they understand what that emotion is actually protecting them from, and then they let that emotion again finally be energy in motion rather than just be a stuck emotion. They let it move through them because they liberate that specific emotion. It's emotional release. It's an emotional release technique.
Yeah.
And it's profound. And you can do this at home by yourself, in your own meditations. If there's specific emotion, let's say anger. We all feel anger, but we all judge for the most part. We all judge anger or rage or sadness, right? But especially anger. We all live in this limiting belief. Well, most of us live in this limiting belief that anger is bad, or we can't be angry, or we can't feel anger because it's bad. And we shun that emotion into another dimension, so that we never, ever, ever have to face it. But it just takes over us in moments, and it should also, but in certain moments, right? As you shared. But I use IFS, especially with emotions, a lot in my own practice, in my own meditations, where I bring this emotion. It's much easier when somebody holds space for you, in my personal opinion and experience, but you still, can face a certain emotion and say, hey, what's up? Why are you here?
Why are you here? Exactly. And so let me expand a little bit on that anger thing. My number one trigger, based on what my childhood experiences were, I watched my father not be so nice to my mother, and that is a deep, deep wound. So anytime that Jim raises his voice, he's not angry per se, but if he's raising his voice, That to me is unsafe. I mean, even though I've healed the parts of me that has to do with my father, it doesn't mean that the trigger goes away completely. It's about being aware of your sensitivities. So if one of the examples we give in our webinars is we reenacted a scene of he getting angry at GPS as we were on an 8-hour drive from Savannah, Georgia to Washington, DC. And then the GPS says, it's going to be 11-hour drive. And we were talking and he kind of missed a turn that would have saved us a half hour. And so he's screaming at the GPS, just the F-bombs. And with me, thank goodness it wasn't towards me, right? If it was towards me, I don't know what would have happened. I just like shut down. When I'm experiencing it, I just get numb and shut down. And he knows that. And then I can't get out of that state because I'm trying to protect myself, right? And then we ended up processing it and took hours. And then he basically said, I said, so tell me more about this angry part. What did you learn growing up about anger? And he said the only emotion that he's ever witnessed his father have was anger.
Wow.
So with men, anger seems to be an accepted quote unquote emotion, but underneath anger are so many other emotions: fear, shame, which they're not in touch with,
sadness.
Yeah, and sadness. And then even I remember he was trying to reprogram something in his Android on his phone, and he's just like yelling at the phone because he couldn't get it to work. And it wasn't directed at me, but I just don't like that angry energy. So what we have negotiated is I said, if you need to get into an angry part, I'm not trying to shun your angry part. And you know how unsafe that feels for me. So now I can, like, if I hear his voice being raised and I know it could go to anger, I'll say, whoa, that energy isn't safe for me right now. Can you tone it down? Because oftentimes he's not even recognizing that his the pitch of his voice is like increasing and it's unsafe. So that's one tactic. Another tactic, I said, it's okay for you to express anger. Obviously not towards me, but if you're angry at GPS or technology or whatever, can you give me a warning that you're going to be angry at something, that you're going to raise your voice, you're going to curse? Give me a heads up that you're going to be in a part so I don't get triggered.
Announce the part.
Announce the part. It's coming. It's coming. So that's one of the ways of achieving better communication within a relationship. Because if I just stop the anger, some partners may say, stop the anger already. It's not, you're not getting curious. You have to drop into your heart. Tell me more about what you learned about anger growing up so that I don't judge it. And so imagine, let's say, when we did that session with the Holocaust part, imagine you were with a partner who judged your food obsession part. And he is constantly like, Leyla, do you really have to do that? And then you just feel so bad about yourself. So let's say if that was a couple that came to us and she's just saying, he's always angry at me, or he's judging me, I can't get through to him. What works in the IFS way of doing couples therapy is that when one person is ready to do the IFS work on their part that affects their partner, and the partner is the witness in the moment to know, oh, that's its job. Oh, that's what it's scared of if it didn't do that. Oh, and then the partner is right there witnessing, yeah, and this part's protecting that 5-year-old when that 5-year-old was doing this with mom, and the partner is right there witnessing that vulnerability. Oh my gosh, there's a little girl underneath that is so hurt. I just want to come and hug her. And I had no idea that that was driving the food part.
Mhm.
Right. And so in the couples therapy in that way, that aspect of the process under IFS is
It creates
so
true
healing.
intimacy. Yeah.
Intimacy, there's so much compassion towards where that came from,
Right.
so that you could help each other out.
Right.
And like, okay, so when I notice you being obsessive or whatever, how can I help this part?
Mhm.
And so it's a real source of deeper intimacy and connection for the couple when we can understand each other's parts and
Right.
where they come from.
It ultimately helps us understand the essence of the person, or
Yes.
the essence of anything, right? And I think that's the ultimate use of heart intelligence, because heart math developed a technique. It's called energetic communication, and you really learn how to listen, actively hear and listen to somebody when they're saying something, and really give them space to speak everything out. But instead of thinking what you're going to respond with, you're actually fully locked in and present with them.
Yes.
And you're actually listening from your heart. You're not listening from your head. And when you listen from your heart, it's a completely different experience, because you're actually hearing the essence of what that person is saying. And most of the time, what we as human beings have been taught, or how we've been taught to communicate, is through words. But we forget that most of the communication happens on an energetic and or
Yes.
subtle level.
Yes.
So when we really use our heart's intelligence, we can start, I mean, it's the sixth sense, literally, right?
Yeah.
And we get to pick up the nuances and the
Yes.
essence of what is actually being communicated. When you listen with your heart, you can feel that the words that might be coming out of that person, if they're not coherent energetically, you can pick the incoherence up energetically.
And that incoherence, if you want to put it in parts like that,
Yeah.
incoherence means a part has blended.
Yes, I love that.
Yes. So the part has taken over, anger has taken over, frustration, annoyance, judgment, criticism, whatever it is. Well, yeah, of course I'm feeling that. And everything is about the tone. Can detect that. You could detect someone, whether or not they're in self. One of the ways is through listening to their tone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the minute your tone is the first thing your partner hears when you're trying to get a message across.
Which is
You
vibration.
you cannot hear the words. All you're feeling is the tone. And if that tone reminds you of anything unsafe from the past, you're going to be reacting to the tone. You cannot even hear what the person is saying.
Yeah.
Because they've been blended with the part as opposed to dropping into their heart. So the goal is to unblend.
I love that. And that's frequency, right? So just like a radio station, if you're tuned at a specific vibration or frequency, you're not going to be able to hear the other, a much lower or a much higher vibration, because it's not, it's not on the same level. And the same goes for, if there's a incoherent part, or a triggered part, and it hears a certain vibration, it doesn't, it just can't compute it.
Right. And the other thing I want to bring up that is important, and when we see this in so many couples, is when a thinker is married to a feeler. A thinker is with a feeler. In the Myers, you can go to 16personalities.com, 16personalities.com, and figure out your Myers-Briggs personality type. I just want to say, like, Myers-Briggs isn't be all and end all, but it's a tool that we use to understand, get a feel for what the couple's parts are, because it's just parts that are operating. And Jim is a thinker, logical thinker. which they say like 70% of men are thinkers and 70% of women are feelers. So when a thinker is with a feeler, oftentimes this is where conflict happens. Thinkers are so used to being successful through logic. Look at the data. Okay, they use their head, and then they try to solve an emotional problem with logic. If I'm all over the place, I'm anxiety ridden. And for a thinker, it's very uncomfortable to hold. They don't know exactly what holding space is for emotions. And thinkers are usually thinkers because their emotions have been shut down through their childhood experiences, that it's not safe. Or especially a lot of men heard, boys don't cry, you suck it up. Crying is weak, vulnerability is weak, all of those messages you get. So then you develop a logic part that is very strong and can be very successful. But logic and feelers don't mix. It's not a safe thing. And so we have to teach the logic-oriented person, you cannot solve an emotional problem with logic. Your only job is to ask, okay, do you want problem solving right now? I noticed that you are kind of discombobulated. Do you want problem solving right now? Or do you want me to just hold space
and listen?
And listen to what you're going through. And holding space is about just mirroring and validating without fixing. You could always ask, I do have some ideas. Would you like to hear them today? Or we can wait till next week, or we could just wait until when you're ready. Mm-hmm. So in relationships, you have to do that. I mean, it doesn't even have to, it could be the mom and daughter relationship. It could be co-worker relationship. And emotions need to be witnessed. Mm-hmm. So they can be discharged.
Exactly.
So there's a place for logic in a relationship. But especially when you're in conflict and the feeler has all sorts of feelings, just want to send a message. Please don't let logic take over your system, because the logic is all in here. You need to drop into your heart and connect somehow with the person who is feeling all sorts of stuff.
And even if they can't connect because there's so many parts, connect with their heart, just listen. Just listen.
And even just say, I don't know what to say or do right now. Mm-hmm. Can you help me? What do you need right now? This is uncomfortable for me. This is different. And especially for some people who have never held space, it's okay to be vulnerable and admit, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Tell me, give me some clue.
Mm-hmm. Help me. Yeah.
Yeah. Help me.
Help you.
Yeah. Help me, help you. And so that's the essence of the power of IFS, and also holding space, and understanding that. And when it comes to relationship conflicts and challenges, which probably 95% of us have, right?
Everybody.
It's, we're going at it from the wrong place. Why don't you ever empty the dishwasher? You promise me that you're going to do it every morning before you go to work. And then the husband, let's say, shuts down. Like, oh, here we go again. I'm being criticized and judged. Even though it's the dishwasher thing, it has nothing to do with the dishwasher. The content is different, but the argument is the same. So when you dig underneath, okay, the way your wife talks to you, okay, what is that reminding you of? What do you say to yourself when she does that? What's your inner dialogue? And then what is your impulse? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, my impulse is just to escape. Yeah. And then what is it afraid of? If you didn't escape and you didn't do that impulse, well, then I'm going to keep getting hammered at. And if you kept getting hammered at, who is that affecting? Who's that little boy underneath that doesn't want to get hammered at. Oh, my mother used to criticize me all the time. I didn't bring good enough grade. So her asking me to empty the dishwasher and I didn't do it makes me feel like I'm a failure. Mm-hmm. Just like I felt when I was a kid. Does the wife know that? Probably not. Mm-hmm. And so if he knew more about his system, the goal is for, if he notices that she's criticizing him, the goal is for him to say, you know, honey, I get that the dishwasher needs to be emptied every day. And I'm open to helping you with that. What I want to share with you is the tone through which you tell me to help you with the dishwasher is unsafe for me. I know you're scared. There's something vulnerable underneath that tone. And I would love to know what that is, or maybe you want to engage in the help of a couples therapist so we can unpack that. But what I want you to know is that when I receive that kind of tone and criticism, the 10-year-old inside of me that kept getting criticized by mom that I'm not good enough and not smart enough, not as smart as the older brother, that gets activated. And I just want to run away. You've turned into my mother. You're my wife. I don't want you to become my mother. Mm-hmm. I would like to help you to help me. And I want to help you too. Yeah. And we speak in a different way. So the thing is, the wife is going this way, blame, right? Pointing finger. Why don't you just empty the dishwasher every day? I would be happy if you just did that every day. You know, maybe she's feeling disrespected because she was disrespected as a kid. So what you have to remember is you point this way, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. The goal is to make a U-turn into yourself, which I just demonstrated that guy did. He's made a U-turn into himself so that he can return to the relationship. He spoke for his vulnerabilities. Yeah. That's how you create connection. That's how you create intimacy. That's how you heal rifts in relationships. And with that, everybody, IFS. All right, everybody. So we are going to pause part 1 here. And in part 2, you will be able to tune in to a live in-person IFS therapy session where Emily is going to hold space and guide me into some very vulnerable parts so that you can really see in real time the power of IFS and how parts will show up. And once we really get to the bottom of these parts, how much healing can take place. So thank you so much, Emily. I love you. I'm so grateful for your incredible work, and we'll see you in part 2.